Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore, and I am really happy with this small podcast, a little short, but we feature the team of PhilaDelic and the Penn Psychedelic Collaborative. This is the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. They coordinated an excellent conference that I just wrapped up here, recording this October 8th, and I spent the previous Friday, Saturday, Sunday with the team, and it was lovely. People from Europe, South America, all over the States. It was really lovely. And this interview is with four folks. So we kind of talk about the project of the Penn Psychedelic Collaborative, which is really novel. I haven't seen too much like this out there at this point. And we'll get into what it is in a moment. But the guests here are Jackie Tileston, a professor of fine arts at Penn, Michael Baime, medical doctor and professor at the medical school at Penn, Taylor Flatt, a pediatric nurse practitioner, currently at Ohio State, and Victor Acero, Ph.D., doing some really interesting, I think, neuro work. But yeah, fascinating folks to talk to and get to know. Really, really loved it. Oh yeah, and Victor's also at Ohio State. So both have backgrounds at Penn, and that's why they're involved. So very exciting, very happy to have been invited to moderate a few panels and contribute in some ways. So thanks to the team for having me, and I hope we can keep some sort of relationship open. All right, enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the other side. Here we are in the basement of, what's the name of this building?
Meyerson.
The Meyerson building. And we're talking to four of the people who put a bunch of effort into planning PhilaDelic, kind of doing a review on the kind of opening keynote we did this morning, and digging into what is the Penn Psychedelic Collaborative. Why are you all interested? You all have slightly different backgrounds. To kick it off, let's just do high-level brief intros.
Yeah. So, my name is Victor Acero. I'm a former Ph.D. candidate here at the University of Pennsylvania in the bioengineering department. I recently graduated and defended, but I'm still serving as the associate director for the Penn Psychedelics Collaborative, and I'm now doing a postdoctoral fellowship and manager of operations strategy at the Center for Psychedelic Drug Research at Ohio State University.
Jackie Tileston. I'm in the Department of Fine Arts, and I'm on the faculty advisory board for the Penn Psychedelics Collaborative.
I'm Taylor Flatt. I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I just started my PhD at the Ohio State University. I'm told to say it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm a co-founder of the Penn Psychedelics Collaborative and the lead organizer for this year's PhilaDelic conference.
My name is Michael Baime. I'm the executive director of the PPC, and I'm also the director of the Penn program for Mindfulness. And my interest in psychedelics is the way in which transcendence and depth of meaning can be brought into everyday life. And so meditation and psychedelics sort of intersect at that point.
Yeah, so as everybody can see, we have sort of a broad spectrum of folks here. So I love that. What I particularly loved about our conversation earlier was this kind of fear a lot of us have in psychedelics around, psychiatry specifically owning psychedelics, not even medicine, but like psychiatry. And that's why I'm doing a lot of work in pain. But, we have a really multidisciplinary team here, and it's not just psychiatry, this like mindfulness deal, this art intersection, mysticism intersection. But anything you want to add about this kind of like intersectionality, or just how broad this approach can be?
Oh, yeah. It was interesting. Like, I, coming from a psychiatry background, got into it because of the psychiatric applications. I was working at Johns Hopkins as a nurse and looked up research trials to join as a healthy participant and found one for psilocybin. I didn't even know what psilocybin was and looked it up.
Did you get in?
I did not. Okay. Still bitter. No. But my gateway was psychiatric applications, but very quickly after meeting different faculty here at Penn, I became increasingly more interested in the non-psychiatric applications. And I'm still, even in curating the PhilaDelic conference, I'm finding endless applications for psychedelics and endless topics that we could hardly fit even with our 42 plus speakers, 12 panels, 4 plenary talks, 2 keynotes. Like that barely scratched the surface. And so I feel like with looking at psychedelics through an interdisciplinary lens, I feel like we don't silo it to, people just being sick to receive help, but also looking at psychedelics as a tool and a vehicle and a lens through which we can view pretty much anything in life. So I'm just so excited by the endless possibilities of that for, creativity and innovation and so many things.
Well, and Jackie, can you comment on that from the perspective of the humanities, like arts, including mysticism, I guess? Sort of an art, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, actually, my kind of entry into the PPC and the psychedelic community here at Penn was actually because of a course I teach on mysticism, mystics and visionaries, art, and other ways of knowing. And it's that other ways of knowing that I feel is really the critical part here. And, my interest has always been in the ways in which, what is consciousness? What is the nature of reality? What the hell is going on here? Those are questions that are not just being addressed by artists and creatives, but obviously by pretty much everyone that cares about meaning making in the world. So, like on the panel yesterday, the ontology and metaphysics panel, it was important to me to have there was a neuroscientist and there was a philosopher who works with metaphysics of the mind, and there's a practitioner who has a background in non-dual Shaiva Tantra philosophy. That was exactly the conversation I wanted to cultivate. So yeah, I mean, I can't think of a area of study that couldn't be part of the conversation. But I also think that this, it's not just mysticism, but what is as Mila said, the cosmovision, what is our paradigm and how that is affecting everything we do, our interpersonal relationships, socio-political issues, the environment, the future of mankind if we have one. Yeah.
Beautiful. Anything you want to add to this?
I think I would say that this interdisciplinarity is actually is at the core, or one of the 2 main things at the core of the Penn Psychedelics Collaborative. The whole reason this in the first place was started was because we saw that although there was a lot of interest at Penn, especially for me, it really smacked me in the face of how much interest there really was when the School of Nursing had a learning seminar series, and it was a really, really well done a series of webinars, and now it's all collected online, and it's a great resource. But I realized how this energy was bubbling up in nursing wanting to do its own thing, and in ethics wanting to do its own thing, and medicine and all these different areas wanting to do their own things, not at all communicating across these different schools or departments. And I feel like the most innovative and impactful work that ultimately is going to be of the most benefit to society at large happens when people are working across traditional disciplinary boundaries, when there's genuine collaboration and open-mindedness to different ways of knowing and perspectives. And so we wanted to create something that would help tie and stitch together all these different parts of the university so that as anything continues to grow, it's bringing everyone along with it, so it stays interdisciplinary rather than it being something that is led by psychiatry and then other departments and studies try to latch on for the ride, but it's still really led by psychiatry. It's led by oncology or led by neuroscience departments, that it's really something where all these different groups feel like equal stakeholders at the table when discussing what work do we want to do at the university, what educational initiatives, all that stuff. So, yeah.
Cool. I saw a poster presentation a while ago. It was in vitro psilocybin for cancers, and they were actually showing some sort of result. I wasn't ever able to ever dig into that, and I don't think we had a chance to talk about that one yet. I'll try to find that one and send it your way. It's a single researcher in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Not a big lab or anything, but yeah. So what are the attitudes over at the medical school right now around this relative to what you would have expected?
Well, they represent, or they are really a expression of the attitudes all over the culture, which is everything from wild excitement to sheer terror, that and everything in between. But as people become more informed about what's possible and also about what isn't, the terror begins to diminish, and also the unrealistic expectations come down to earth a little bit. And I'm coming to see that the most important role of psychedelics isn't to treat depression or psychiatric illness or to do anything except to make people healthier. And what that means is that whatever their calling is, whatever they feel moved to do, whatever matters most to them, they'll be unafraid of reaching for that. They'll be more successful at obtaining that. And they'll actually feel that in a way that allows them to radiate it and share it with others, making us healthier in all the ways that we are. Is really possible, and there's nothing else like this. Maybe a lot of psychotherapy for some people, maybe the death of a loved one or the birth of a child, like people get shocked and drop some of their habits and limitations, but psychedelics are so powerful and so predictable across so many different kinds of people.
Yeah. When the Eagles win the Super Bowl, something like that. Kidding.
Right.
Maybe
there
not.
will be a lot of ecstatic experiences and a lot of really drunk people falling downstairs. So, like I said, it goes both ways.
Not mystical.
Not mystical,
Depends on how hard you hit your head. So, have you been interacting with some of the nursing school folks here around this lately? By the way, I didn't even mention this, but one of my aunts did her MSN here.
Oh, cool.
And then, my mother was turned on, like I said earlier, by the series you were mentioning, Victor, around, the Penn School of Nursing doing kind of nursing perspectives on psychedelics, which is really cool too.
Yeah. No, I am really, I'm biased. I love nurses. I think we're the best. But it's been really amazing and at the same time surprising to see Penn Nursing really take a lead. I'm really shocked that other institutions haven't recognized the role of nurses, given that we are one of the most prominent workforces like in the entire field. We work with every aspect of the lifespan.
The most trusted profession.
The most trusted profession. So take everything I say very seriously. It's interesting, because we are natural facilitators, and we are natural walkers of life alongside people in all different phases. And so I feel like it's both similar almost to the interdisciplinary aspect, where it's something that is painfully obvious in some ways, but also so vastly under-examined or underutilized. So I was really so excited and still so excited to see that Penn Nursing is really taking the lead in educating the nurses for psychedelics, even from a public education standpoint. We can't help that people are interested in psychedelics. And if someone comes into, a primary care office or an emergency department and they're on mushrooms, they're interested in mushrooms, we have an obligation ethically and morally to serve the needs of the population, whatever those are. At one point it was bath salts, and turns out we got to learn all about that now. And then it was Tide Pods. Now what do we do with that? Not that this is the same as that, but the needs of the population we need to respond to, and I think that nurses play such a central role. So it's been amazing to see so many nurses attend the conference, and that to be a big emphasis at Penn.
I often say nurses can be some of the best facilitators out there, because what other profession is with people in such excruciating pain so often for such long periods of time. It's tough. Now, from the arts perspective, can you kind of briefly talk about this? Not all psychedelic experience is mystical. Not all psychedelic art is all that interesting. But how do you look at this from maybe with the fine arts lens?
I think I'll start with the problem I have with what we call psychedelic art, which is a kind of contemporary equivalent of like 18th century travelers going to Venice and sending home a watercolor of what they've seen to share with the people who didn't go on the journey. And I think a lot of psychedelic art falls into this kind of surreal, fantastic genre, which people really love, and I respect that. Because, Alex Gray said he loves it when people come up to him and say, dude, that's exactly what I saw. So there's some value to that. It's like an illustration of what is being experienced visually and narratively in that world. But I think that from the perspective of kind of the art world, I'll put that in air quotes, that's that's exactly what I saw is the last thing I want to hear as an artist. And so, my challenge within like curating a show last year, selecting video for the reception is really like, what can visual art bring to this field that's not the trip report, but more like the art itself being psychoactive, the art itself bringing us close to the ineffable. Like as an abstract artist, that's kind of where I'm pushing that. I'm interested in those places where language fails, where naming fails, where our preloaded codes fail. And the ineffable is we're always trying to find language for it, but like how do we find imagery for it as well? And so I think, the visual component of this year's PhilaDelic, we had David Glowacki dealing with like, how do we deal with liminal experience, the near-death experience, which is not picturable, it's not representable, or Andre Emilson doing the like geometric topographies of consciousness. Like it's another way of picturing, but not the way we're used to. And I think that those are exciting because it has the kind of mind expanding potential that the psychedelics themselves do. So, I mean, I told my class I was doing a lecture on psychedelic art that my hope is that 10 years from now I have a whole different range of work to show them.
Yeah, I love that. And I like the idea of conversations like this happening in the art world more often. Perhaps some sort of PPC field trip to Art Basel or something. You all deserve warm weather in the winter. Well,
yeah, can we do the Venice Biennale?
If anybody wants to fund it, I'm in. But yeah, it's interesting to think of how PPC, this collaborative, could be seen outside of the organization at University of Pennsylvania. Like, what is it, that you all bring? You bring a lot of credibility as, one of these, very old institutions. What was I calling him yesterday? Mr. Philadelphia, Ben Franklin. It's roots like that are really interesting, and it goes really far. And the amount of impact that Penn can have and is having is pretty interesting, not just in psychedelics, but elsewhere.
It's America's first university, and we have America's first hospital here as part of our system. I mean, it's as old as it gets. I mean, I think we need to give it a cane and sort of put it to bed, but actually it's a happening place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gorgeous. This is my first time on campus. I don't know if I told any of you that, but it's fascinating.
Gorgeous.
It's super pretty.
Tangent. You should go to the University Museum and go into the Great Hall and look at, there's a perfect crystal sphere there. Since somebody stole it some years ago, it has plexiglass around it now, which is a terrible shame. It's still the most beautiful object I've ever seen. Wow. So, if you guys haven't seen that, you really should.
No.
Right. Yeah, it's probably beautiful alone. And then, there was a conference here ages ago, Philadelphia, 2008 maybe, or 2009. And I remember a bunch of the conference organizers ate mushrooms with Dennis McKenna, and they went to the Muter Museum or something.
Oh no! God.
It's not where I would want to go.
No.
Do you know what's there?
A little bit, not my style.
Yeah.
There was the Boston Museum of Science, which I used to frequent a lot, had that oddities segment, like human stuff, and nightmares for years. So it's not for me. But, so Philadelphia is not new to this psychedelic thing. This is kind of just like a additional resurgence,
Right.
which is great, and now it's linking together different disciplines at Penn, which is really cool. Like the gentleman that came on, what was the gentleman's name that came on for some comments after our panel this morning?
Renyu Liu, yes.
Renyu Liu, and like he started commenting about salvinorin for stroke. And first time I had heard a serious scientist kind of comment on something so serious around salvinorin, other than like, just kind of characterizing the molecule and the experience. But I don't know, have you all seen a resurgence in interest around salvia?
There is like I'd say it's like one of the more understudied molecules, at least like for its therapeutic application. Psychologically, I can't speak to how useful it could be, but I feel like every other compound, ranging from ibogaine to 5-MeO can have some psychological therapeutic value. I would imagine so can salvinorin. I would love to see like Peter and all these other folks in the metaphysics and ontology sections try to like make sense of like what these experiences are, where you can become like a sofa for like 100 years. Like what was that exactly?
It is the weirdest substance ever.
But I think, it's so fascinating to see, these applications outside of like psychiatry and psychology, treating like these like different neurological conditions. And like Renyu definitely is like the leader for like that stroke application with salvinorin, doing this research since I think 2012, going from mice models to fetal pigs to rodents, and now in rhesus monkeys, I think like 1 or 2 years ago, they published those studies showing that it reduced the cognitive damage following stroke injury. It made sure the neurovascular coupling wasn't disrupted by that stroke injury. It just like dilates those blood vessels, make sure that the tissue remains perfused. And even when there is like a lack of oxygen or this like hypoxic injury, it reduces the amount of damage sustained by the tissue, so there's not the same amount of like neuronal loss, tissue loss, and injury. So it's incredibly fascinating. And he has a startup as well that's I can't remember exactly what the name of it. I think it's NeuroKappa. So he has a startup that's come out of his research here at Penn, and so that's really exciting. And there's also other researchers who are looking at other like non-psychological psychiatric applications, like John O'Donnell over at the Veterans Hospital. He's also a Penn affiliate, but like many of our faculty also have dual affiliations with the Veterans Hospital. He's interested in doing animal work with rodent models, or what we're really known for at Penn is our pig models for brain injuries, using those to study the use of psychedelics on traumatic brain injury. Does it improve recovery? Does it, through plasticity, through reducing inflammation, through reducing the activity, like all the negative changes that happen in non-neuronal cells that like help regulate the brain's like environment. There's a lot of really cool research in those areas, and like Penn's definitely also doing a lot of that work.
Briefly on the psychological end, lower doses is what's the story. When you hear these crazy salvinorin or salvia stories, people are taking crazy high doses, and they're just blood concentration is just like outrageous. So traditionally it was orally, like chewed, so it would be a much slower onset, and people are saying it's a lot more workable from a somatic perspective. A lot of people are liking it at that kind of lower oral, kind of like an alcohol extract or something.
Yeah, the liquid, yeah.
You just sit with it, similar to like a ketamine lozenge or something like that. Yeah, and interesting in that it's not scheduled federally. So kind of can make research a little cheaper and easier in some cases. So what have been some interesting things in terms of collaborations and or interest between schools at the university? If you want to speak to that, Michael.
In this area, I mean, I think that we're really, I don't have, I'm sorry. I'm not sure how to answer that. So I think that the research that I know of is within one of the, silos. So, I mean, is there, I thought you.
Like collaborations that we've been exploring with other schools.
Well, like schools inside Penn.
Oh, schools inside Penn. Yeah, I'm thinking this is a lot of well, it's been interesting because
Probably leads into the class you two are working on.
It's been interesting because structurally, a lot like Penn is not unique in that a lot of schools don't necessarily have the infrastructure to support interdisciplinary work entirely. Like a lot of schools can like own their work, and you can take classes in like other fields, but to have something that's like truly cohesive, you kind of have to like guest lecture or something. So really, even in creating the Penn Psychedelics Collaborative, that has in and of itself been its own interdisciplinary work of kind of bringing people in together, even just coordinating schedules across different schools. So that's kind of been like a starting place. But since even having the inception of this idea 2 years ago, there's been kind of a lot of percolation of like, okay, well, what could this look like? And so that's really sprung out into the class that Jackie and Michael are launching in the spring of 2025, applying for a grant that look at some cross-disciplinary work that we could do. And also another grant that we're pursuing that's looking at both cross-disciplinary and cross-institutional work, specifically in the humanities. So there honestly isn't a ton of interdisciplinary work currently. And maybe, Victor, you know some? Yeah.
Well, I think I was just going to say, I mean, there is like a lot of efforts to kind of like, I guess, it's a lot of seeds getting planted for like eventually something to like come out of like, and to eventually have something come out of that. Like, I mean, I think Michael could speak a little bit more to like, for example, one of the speakers we had here, Glowacki, he had a really cool presentation on the use of VR for inducing these altered states of consciousness that things like 5-MeO can induce, and showing that even just with the VR induced experiences, that itself has therapeutic value by the states that they can evoke. And we have faculty in oncology. They were very interested in doing psychedelic research, but they don't have the approval. So it's like, okay, how do we even get started? It's like, I have a passion. I want to do this, but I don't even know how to begin. And it's going to be years until we can even genuinely begin because of the scheduling of things. And now this feels like a really great opportunity to bring in arts and VR to work with across institutions, pulling in Glowacki, but also bringing us into oncology. So that would be being able to have Michael Baime with his like mindfulness and medicine and medical background, bringing in William Levin, who is in the oncology and radiology department. We have Jeffrey Vidala, who does VR research at the Center for Neuroaesthetics at Penn. So it's like this trifecta like forming just around that application of like VR induced altered states of consciousness for improving psychological like outcomes in people with cancer. Those are like three, like those connections wouldn't have been made without the PPC. And so it's not as like wild as going from like fully like from anthropology into like neuroscience, but it is still these like new like seeds that are like beginning to like emerge that I don't think would have happened without the PPC like kind of being that central gathering place. So I think it's just us being a place for things to be catalyzed rather than going and intentionally saying these connections need to come out. This kind of a connection will be made. It's just allowing for that to emerge.
Which I guess maybe this will be a part of the description of the podcast, but this is also taking place at PhilaDelic, which is one of our main initiatives, our annual conference that's on the interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary frontiers of psychedelic studies. So we've had a ton of speakers across 12 different disciplines, bringing together really everyone who's at the forefront of psychedelic research in their respective field. And so, as Victor mentioned, this is one of our primary initiatives, but this is one of those things where we just have to watch and see kind of like what comes out of it. But I can't even tell you how many conversations I've overheard that are like, oh my gosh, I'd love to talk more about this project, or I'd love to go visit you here. And so that's what I'm kind of waiting and watching for.
This conference has been so great for that because I've had like so many discussions about people, who are interested in like what I do and how it might relate to what they want to do and how that's relevant to psychedelics. It keeps happening. People are coming up to me and saying, hey, have you considered? It's like, no, but yes. It's been just fantastic that way. And the only question is, for me, is like, do I really want to work that hard? But I guess the answer is yes, because it matters.
Yeah. The meaning underlying what we might be able to do here with our culture is substantial with psychedelics in the mix. And it's, we're at a pretty dire point in our planet, our species history, at least, world's history. And psychedelics are one hope. Sasha Shulgin expressed interest in psychedelics as a potential world-saving agent because he just, what else is there but, a lot of education that might take 20 to 40 years or generations to transform a culture versus here's a pill with some method and education. And hopefully that changes the minds enough that we're all, on Team Spaceship Earth. Hopefully sooner than later. So you did get some grant funding, and I was mentioning earlier, it would be really cool to see somebody try to, match that grant that Harvard, a couple of those groups at Harvard received, so that we can actually have like intercollegiate competition of sorts. And I think that would just be really good for the whole space. Once we actually see everybody kind of have to like, oh, okay, that was amazing. This is amazing. Okay, let's just keep trying to level up. And I would really love to see that. So let's hope.
Yes, let's hope. That's what would be best. That would be great if that could happen.
I mean, it's I think it's just really incredible, like how much has happened with such little institutional like funding or support. I mean, two large conferences. This one had 45 speakers. Last year's had 36 speakers. We've had another community event earlier this year, like a documentary screening for like We Are the Medicine, and now we have this course coming out in like spring 2025, and it's like all this has been just driven by a bunch of faculty and students and postdocs and staff, not even all at the University of Pennsylvania, but just in the Philadelphia community that recognize the value that the vision that we have could have. And so, it's been really incredible, just kind of like not like letting the vision just continuing to guide us without creating a vision that is like preformed based on like whatever the current constraints and limits we think exist based on like, what things normally would look like at Penn. How does a center normally get started at Penn or at a university? How does research normally get started? How does a conference usually get organized? It's just shooting out with the mission, not letting any like preconceived like understandings of how things are supposed to unfold, like kind of contaminate that. And I think that's been really effective, letting this be a grassroots effort, which it is. I think that's also given it a lot of very unique energy and like attraction.
Yeah, I know. As much as I would have loved to have like a bunch of funding from the get-go, it has been really an interesting process to think about as a group, to kind of look at this as a labor of love. Like it really has been, all of us have full-time jobs, and this is something that is like my like main hobby now, if I can call it that. So I feel like it's really created like such a distinct energy of just like so much love and passion towards creating something despite so many limitations and despite so many constraints, resource-wise and structurally. So I feel like that's really forced us to really pare down on our vision and to be very intentional with how we use every bit of time, every bit of funding we have. Every person who's on our team is contributing something, whether that's their area of expertise, the resources that they're familiar with. It's kind of created this unique, kind of very fertile ground for us to then spring from.
Two things. I'll just say that I've been at Penn for 47 years. This is the most satisfying thing I've ever done. And the other thing that I want to ask is that you've talked to a lot of people in a lot of different places, and you've had a good look at us now. What would you suggest? What would you recommend for us maybe that we haven't thought of or that we might explore?
So I know you're doing monthly meetups, is it? Here on campus or no?
Monthly faculty advisory, like all the faculty and students and staff get to come together once a month for like just touching base. Like, this is what's going on. What can we do differently? Where are we going from here? Once a month.
Yeah, I would try to come up with some cheap and easy types of events to get people together more regularly in person. So you don't necessarily have to have the filmmaker to show a film, for instance, right? You could do a little panel with it or something if you chose. And then it's not necessarily about the panel. The panel gets people here. And then you can have interaction with that whole audience. And then something approaching grand rounds. I don't know exactly what that is, but like, how do we get people to come in and share amazing case studies and or papers and generate conversations and like build some sort of kind of cultural anchor, and then to Isaac's point earlier is like, how do we develop the daily, weekly, quarterly, and annually kind of like cadence? Like, it seems like you're getting into your annual cadence with this conference, but is there something that's, like a gala, maybe a bunch of fine art students want to contribute a painting that might help fund the organization, and it gets auctioned off or something. And then, tragically I can do this all day and it ruins my life.
Do you mind?
We can talk.
Actually, all the things that you said are like, yeah.
Yeah, cheap and easy, and you have the facilities. So like a lot of organizations don't have buildings, and they don't have project. Like, I can't tell you the amount of horrible situations around projectors I've had trying to like just get, some cheap rental space, and like, oh, okay, now I have to do what? And you have that. So you lean into your infrastructure and what you have already, which is an amazing reputation, a beautiful campus, and you're in the middle of a major American city. And with rail access to New York and DC and Boston. So there's so much interesting stuff that you all can do. And I was bringing up the HPPD work earlier. Like, that's really important area of study that can be done relatively cheaply. And you have all the equipment here, like TES or TCMS or something like that, plus a little bit of therapy and a little bit of like manual kind of like physical therapy looking stuff. We can make like huge strides in that population that's one of the most vocal critics of psychedelics, which is why I brought up HPPD earlier, because they are some of the most vocal critics of this movement.
Sure.
Because they're not getting help.
Appropriately so.
Right. Orphan conditions is such a small population that, like, psychedelics aren't funded. So, like, how can we actually fund, So I do some work at Psychedelic Medicine Coalition with Melissa Lavasani in DC, where we're looking to open up federal science funding. And that's like you contribute $1, you might get like $100,000 in return from the feds. Like that kind of like asymmetrical reward is big, and that kind of stuff then funds real research and in people and at the lab level. So there's so much.
And there's been such a shift away in general, like away from federal funding of medical research, especially like psychiatric research, that it feels like, this is going to be really important to feel right now. I feel like it can't be largely like corporate sponsored research, because the kinds of questions that a company wants to ask are not necessarily like the best questions for like an advancement of knowledge, for like, general like purposes for the betterment of society. It's a question that they has a good return on investment. And I think ultimately, like, I hope that psychedelics can then, start to get this more federal funding support, so that more unique questions can be asked, more innovative research can be done. But yeah, no, it's the future is very bright.
Yeah. I want to thank you all for all your hard work, and I hope to be in touch and be back. Yeah.
We really do too. I mean, you have a perspective that we could benefit from a lot. We're in this tiny little, like we think it's the whole universe, but actually it's just sort of a little. and your thoughts are really appreciated. So thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you all, and until next time.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for coming.
We'll see you this afternoon.
And there you have it, the Penn Psychedelic Collaborative, 4 of the many representatives that organization has. PhilaDelic will be back next year, I believe, and I think we're talking about October, I think they mentioned. So stay tuned. And I'm pumped. I'm really hoping I can make it again. So yeah, thanks again to everybody who participated and gave talks. There's so much interesting stuff there. All right, I think that's it for now. Thank you all for tuning in to Psychedelics today, and we will see you on the next episode. Joe Moore signing off. Bye-bye.